as you can see from the agenda, I said I was going to give some stories. And I said they were going to be related to the human rights in the Philippines, and Sri Lanka, and Tibet. And I've gotten rid of Tibet. So why did I pick Sri Lanka and the Philippines human rights to talk about? Well, first of all, get on the bus that David Loeb and I did a couple of weeks ago. They were, I think, 2 of the 5 countries that they emphasized. And we went to the Cooper Union at the beginning, and we heard lectures on human rights in the Philippines and in Sri Lanka and elsewhere. And then we trudged around. I think we must have walked 2 miles. We went all the way from 7th Street to 49th Street, walking.
Wow.
And there were vigils in front of the administrative buildings where these people, the young Amnesty people, were screaming, basically, about it. So anyway, we have the Philippines and we have Sri Lanka. And there were other reasons why I picked the Philippines. First of all, let me just say about the Philippines first. The United States has had such intimate connections with the Philippines ever since 1904, the time of the Spanish-American War, when we appropriated. And second, Duarte, who is the current president, who I'm going to talk about in some detail, a Trumpian-like figure, he actually met with Trump. I think it was a couple of months ago, and Trump said, "This is somebody I really admire. He really knows how to govern his country." Trump said that. And you'll hear in a moment a little bit about Duarte if you don't know anything about him. And second, Tillerson went to the Philippines in Manila, and he refused to condemn the human rights killings and the anti-drug war, which I'm going to talk about, which is as many as 20,000 or 30,000 people have been killed in the last couple of years in the Philippines. So you can see there's that little tie. And as far as Sri Lanka, I picked that because of what happened on Sunday. It's very timely. As begin to see some of the violence and the hatred that's occurring in Sri Lanka. So I think I will start talking about the Philippines first. I might ask some of you, when we talk about human rights in the Philippines, is there anything that comes to mind for you guys? I'm trying to make this a little more interactive.
Well, Duterte's been killing people extrajudiciously over drug possession.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, Marcos was the dictator there for a long time.
I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. Is there anything else? For me, when I think of the Philippines, I think of World War II.
Oh, sure.
You know, basically, I think of Douglas.
I will return.
Douglas MacArthur. I will return.
Yes.
Basically.
I saw every year I watch CNN Heroes, and one of the earlier heroes, I think there's a lot of poverty that we don't maybe know about. There was this man that won Hero of the Year, and he had a push cart, and he used to go in with and teach the poor children with this small cart, and that was like, there's more poverty, I think, which I wouldn't connect it to right off the top of my head, but severe poverty.
General Douglas MacArthur's father crushed a rebellion in the Philippines. He was also an army general in around before the First World War.
What kind of rebellion?
Well, it was a rebellion. People wanted their independence for their particular part of the Philippines.
Yeah, after we appropriated the Philippines in 1904. There was a rebellion.
Why did we grab it? I don't,
We grabbed it because we could, which is why we were grabbing money.
because we were in imperial power. We wanted to be.
Colonial power.
We took Cuba, and if
Yeah.
Cuba, that little boat that's sitting down here on the
Right,
river
sure.
actually sailed into the Manila
Right.
harbor.
Yeah.
And following that, there was plenty of violence, and the person who later became President Taft, who was in President Teddy Roosevelt's administration, actually had an army there also that was trying to put down. I always say that because the leader of the Ethical Society, this was his great-grandfather. Anyway, a little history.
No, does the United States still have a base in the Philippines? Because they did.
We have a large base in the southern Philippines,
Okay.
basically. And I'll, if I remember, I'll say a few things about that as well. We've given them $145 million. As you know, money is given to many countries, and I suspect it's all given in terms of forcing them to use it to buy arms, which is one of the ways that is what's on when we give money to different countries. Anyway, I can't prove that. Anyway, a little history. Because, I'm a history buff, and if this is too boring, let me know. But 1521 was a big time, because that's when the Spanish came in to the Philippines. The Philippines were not a country at that time. They were a bunch of several hundred islands. The indigenous people, I'm not sure of their genomes, of their genetics, but they were animalistic. Their animalistic religion. They had Islam had never taken hold there because of strong belief of spirit, of animal spirits, basically. And that's very important because they became 100% Catholic a little bit later. Well, then there's the 1904 Spanish-American War, which we already talked about, U.S. colony, World War II history, Japanese occupation, 1946 liberation. I don't know a lot about all of this, basically what happened in these years, but I will say a word about Marcos, who was elected. They became a republic in 1972 or so. It took a few years for them to become a republic, and they have a constitution, and the presidents are elected. And Marcos, he was elected in 1965, and as soon as he was elected, he imprisoned thousands, killing. But a lot of you know about Marcos because he was supported by the United States. And I can tell you what happened when he had to leave.
His wife had a lot of shoes.
Yeah. Well, he established martial law, curfews, and then in 1985, the reason I say this is because Duarte loves the history of Marcos. And the current president, has sort of patterned himself after Marcos. Anyway, there was a revolution in 1985. The United States helped Marcos leave, and he's lived the rest of his life in Hawaii. When he left, though, he took $100 billion.
Pocket change.
Pocket change, yeah.
Now, where did that go, if you're talking about corruption?
Yeah, 100
It
billion.
must have been in some Swiss account or something.
I don't know,
That's a nice round number, isn't it?
That's
Probably.
very-
100 billion.
probably New York real estate.
Maybe that's what they thought he took over his 20 years. Anyway, basically.
A lot of cash and resources were gone. It's really.
Anyway,
Yeah.
following that, there was a series of presidents. But Rodrigo Duterte is who I'm going to talk about, since he's the existing president. He was elected 2 years ago. He was the 16th president of the Philippines. And I'm really talking about, first of all, I should go back and tell you a little bit about what the amnesty issue here. The amnesty issue is Senator Lila de Lima, who was 18 months ago was in prison by Duterte and is in prison. And I'll talk a little bit more later. And the letter, which I will ask people to sign, maybe near the end of the meeting, has to do with demands that she be released and so on. But that's the amnesty story. But the two people that are involved are De Lima and Duterte. I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing this. I'll talk about Duterte first. He was trained as a lawyer. He was a prosecutor. And then he was a long-time layer of Mavis. He was kind of like Rizzo. He was a law and order guy. Unbridled police killings, curfews, I should say, in this town. There had been some, I guess, people that were stealing things a lot, and he of course stopped it all with he's a law and order guy, as much as other law and order people do that. He was a populist. He is a populist and nationalist, and like some of our presidents here, when he ran for president, he ran on the issue of a war against drugs, which is very compelling. Just like here, this was such a compelling issue for so many of our politicians. He won. Let's give an overview of his 2-year reign. It was a disaster. Human Rights Watch has listed it as a calamity. Immediate extrajudicial killings, 1,400 in the first three months. And now it's thought in the 2 years that maybe 12 to 20,000 people have been killed.
Under Duterte.
By Duterte.
Is this the police, or is it right-wing gangs, or who is it?
It's police.
It's police.
This is organized. I'll tell you a little bit about how he did that. The people that have been killed or disappeared are petty criminals, street children, and drug people. And Duterte's like Trump. He has a big mouth. And this is the sort of things that he said. He told police that if the idiots resist arrest, kill them. He told them that if they rape women, he would absolve them. And he attacked the media. And he's right at the stage now where he's closing down the media. And one of the letters that I have is written by Amnesty International people having to do to support this, one of the big media newspapers in it.
So he's killing anyone who's using drugs, and he's telling the police to rape women. Is that just what you
He's
said?
going against, as people like him do, anybody that opposed him.
How can you get away with killing children, though?
Anyway, back to De Lima. Let me just say a little bit about her background, which is a very distinguished background. And David and I heard a very impassioned talk about her. Trained as a lawyer, but in 2008, she was chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Human Rights under the previous president. In 2011, she was Secretary of the Department of Justice. She received international awards. And note that when she was doing this, and Duterte was still mayor, she investigated him because of what was happening in his city. So this would be like somebody who came against Trump, So of course, one of the first things he did was arrest her. And she's been in jail ever since, basically. But, he's a nationalist, and he has views. And one of them is he doesn't want the United States to run the country, the business of the country. If we ran it, but we certainly were influential. He, in fact, has approached China and Russia instead. And he's demanded that the troops who are living in the southern part of the Philippines, that they be removed.
Right.
Basically. Yeah, despite this, when he came to talk to Trump, everything was one, they had their arms around each other, and as I said, Trump said he thinks he's great because he knows how to govern a a country, is what Trump said.
Did Duterte visit the White House?
Yes,
Oh,
there's pictures of him.
yeah.
However, there are some, like in this country, there are institutions in the country that are still there that are opposing him. And one is the Supreme Court. He hasn't been able to get rid of the Supreme Court. And they have ordered release of documents on the killings of thousands of suspects. Anyway, the two people I'm talking about is Duterte and Lima. And since this is Amnesty International, I'll read the letter that I will ask you to sign a little bit later. This is to the Department of Justice. Apparently they have one. I am writing about my concern that Senator Leila de Lima remain in prison. The authorities have mistreated de Lima and further violated her human rights while she has been in detention. She's been held in isolation in a camp, which is the police headquarters. She is rarely allowed visitors. Delegations from foreign governments have been prevented from seeing her. She has been denied the use of electronic devices because she wanted to issue a press release. She is criticized, maybe I should have emphasized before, but one of her major things was criticizing the war on drugs because this leads the police to do practically anything that they want to do, basically, as an excuse for which we have seen elsewhere, maybe in Mexico and maybe this country. The United Nations, European Union officials spoke out against her business, her being in jail. I indicated that Duterte is starting to harass the media, and a letter that I have also, which comes from Amnesty, tries to support the editor of the Rapier, basically. So anyway, that's the story of the Philippines as I know it. In preparing this talk, I was amazed at how different this is from Sri Lanka, who they have a similar president, how different it is. For example, religious problems are not important. 100% Catholic, all living in.
Don't they have an Islamic insurgency?
They have some refugees that have come in, and there's been a sort of resurgence against them. They came from Pakistan.
Okay.
But it's good old English Empire built all these nice churches.
It was my fault.
That they worship in. Thank you for doing that. So, anyway, if you want to ask any questions about Duterte, he is a bad one. And this is kind of a...
Can they remove him? I mean, in the ballot box? Is that possible?
He's been elected for 2 years, and I don't know how long the term of office is. My guess is that it will be like what Marcos did, maybe.
Right.
And there won't be another election, or he'll have so much power that he won't be able to. I don't know, I'm just guessing, basically. No way to remove him.
They had a horrible earthquake, hurricane.
Yes, they had a
Hurricane.
They had a horrible hurricane.
Typhoon, yeah.
Yeah.
And about 3 days later, it was Remembrance Day. Veterans Day.
Right.
Sorry, whatever. Veterans Day in November. And there was this big wreath. There was a battle in the Philippines that a lot of Americans died. So there was this big wreath from this group of Philippines
Right.
at the memorial to the Americans. I just thought that was very gracious. Yeah. But I remember that huge hurricane. And that's what happened there. They're okay. They recovered from it.
It's not on the web now. It's a current
okay.
issue,
Yeah.
basically. But anyway, this is one country, and the person that talked on this at the Cooper Union was very emotional. It was a woman, very emotional. At least I was moved by it.
When
So-
did we invade? Under what administration?
Under who?
The history of when did we invade the Philippines?
Teddy Roosevelt was president at the time of the Spanish-American War.
So
Oh,
we didn't.
okay.
We
That's
didn't
when we
just-
appropriated them as a colony, which
Oh, so
went
we-
from them to 1946, when at the end of the
Uh-huh.
war they changed.
So,
They became
w- was that the same war when Puerto Rico?
Yeah, of
Oh,
course.
okay,
yes,
yeah.
Of course.
Okay,
Cuba, Puerto Rico.
okay.
And it was
see,
Cuba.
a Spanish colony.
Yes,
Yeah.
from 1521.
Oh, yeah, wow.
And it was very
That's
easy to convert
crazy.
them to Catholicism, apparently, because maybe they merged the animalistic, as often
Yeah.
happens. They merged the religion first.
The Spanish Empire reached all the way to the Philippines
Oh,
in
yeah.
1521.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is about the same time as, if you know English history, where the big bunch of ships came and tried to invade England and got caught by the typhoon. In the days of Elizabeth I,
Mm.
you know, the first time. Is my history correct?
No. Elizabeth was after that,
Was she a little bit after? She was in the 16th century.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe a little bit after. They were a power.
1549 was when Henry sacked the
Henry VII.
monasteries. Henry VIII,
Henry VIII, yes, thank
who
you.
was the father of Elizabeth.
Yes.
So it was after that. I think it was 1564 when she
Yeah.
became.
But they were a power, you know.
Yeah.
And
1521
Portugal was
Henry
a power
the-
also.
Napoleon was her mother, right?
Yeah.
1521 would have been Henry VII. That would have been the father of Henry VIII.
Right, Anne Boleyn was Elizabeth's mother, right?
Yeah.
The second wife.
Let me talk a little about
Second
Sri
wife.
Lanka, okay?
Sri Lanka, okay.
This is going to be shorter.
No, I can't remember.
The amnesty, and this is kind of
I'm
kind
taking
of-
notes
kind of
now.
strange
You got
why-
your years
why,
right.
Get on the bus, pick this particular issue, because it occurred in 2006, basically. And what the letter and the protest in New York was protesting the killing of the Trinco Five. 5 students killed in 2006. Rather reminiscent of what happened in Mexico, basically, for me. And was never investigated, and that's what the letter is suggesting. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the history, because this history is so different, because the bottom line of this history, of course, is the different religions and what we're seeing now in Sri Lanka, basically. Mostly a Buddhist country, 6% Christian now, and I think about 20% Islam, basically. And a horrible civil war, which they have not yet recovered from. What you're seeing in the massacre in the Catholic Church, it's just a continuation of violence that's occurred ever since the Civil War. Anyway, discovered by the Portuguese. And they had it for a while. What was his name, De Gama? And then the Dutch, very smart people, since I'm Dutch.
Are you a Dutch chauvinist?
I'm a Dutch chauvinist. My father spoke Dutch.
Oh, really?
They then came,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to remember when the English took it. It was the time of when they moved. Sri Lanka, as you know, is Ceylon. It's this little island at the bottom of India. I think that was
So
like
these colonies-
1790
These
when the
colonies get
English
passed
took over
around.
India. What?
These colonies get passed around, don't they? It's like,
Well,
it's amazing.
at United States, we were very strong here, on the Swedes, as you know, in this area, before the English took it over. This was a Swedish territory around here. Came up Baltimore, Delaware River. Anyway, I think it was about 1790 when the English, because they were attracted to spice and took over India. But Ceylon was never a part of India. And the English did not consider it to be a part, but they considered it to be a crown colony instead of, and they didn't administrate it very much. But it was entirely, according to what I read, administered very, very separately. But there were rubber plantations, And the English recruited the Hindus from India to work the rubber plantations. And these were the Tamil Tiger people that later wanted succession. But we can blame the English for bringing them into Sri Lanka, where they were living in the northeastern part of Sri Lanka. Anyway, the Civil War, the Hindu people, the Tamil Tiger liberation people, they were always persecuted by the Buddhists and other people that lived in Ceylon. In fact, they lost their vote, even. This is prior to the start of the Civil War, which started 20 years ago. And there was this group. They all were Hindu. They wanted to secede, basically, and that was the Civil War. Very brutal Civil War, you know. 60,000 people were killed. There was lots of anger, lots of sectarian anger against the Hindus. I guess mostly by the Buddhists. And I don't understand why the Buddhists were like, because every Buddhist that I've ever known has been very peaceful. But
Buddhist fundamentalists.
yeah, well, they weren't so much Buddhist fundamentalists. It was like, it was similar to our Civil War in some ways, or the Civil War in, it's been considered to what happened in North Ireland and the Troubles there. Very similar, with the Troubles, you know, and then what followed it. 10 years ago, I think it was 2009, the Civil War ended. And the governments that succeeded that never made any attempt to bring the country together, is what it sounds like to me.
It was the opposite.
For example,
Let me say something. Jivadas was a friend from Sri Lanka, from northern Sri Lanka. He said what they did is worse. They took the Tamils and they concentrated them in an area, and that was to segregate them from the rest of the country.
that was during the war.
But that's an ongoing process, that they're still doing that.
Yes, you're right.
And they are picking off the Tamil leaders systematically to prevent them from organizing. So this is a big part of the recent history of Sri Lanka. And I say this because Kumar Tamburdarai, who was with Amnesty's International staff, has told me, he was saying, he was relating that some of these things that had happened to him personally. He'd been an Amnesty person of prisoner of conscience, and Amnesty succeeded in getting him out of jail, which is very...
You're talking about Prageeth.
No. It was
this is
Kumar Tamburdarai.
Because I put a little thing up here.
Yeah, this is much more. This is 25 years ago when he was a student leader in Sri Lanka, and he was a major leader of the Tamil student movement in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I knew that. And the other thing that's happening is that the Army has occupied a lot of the land still that belongs to the Tamil Tiger people, the Hindu people, and refuses to give the land back to the people, basically. So
weren't the targets of this recent killing the Christians?
yeah, I'm going to get into that as to
Okay.
why that happened. As to
Okay.
why that happened.
Okay.
The other thing that's been